Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Wheel of Mind, a character point of view reread podcast dedicated to Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series. This season, we've been taking a deep dive into Moiraine's point of view, and this is our penultimate episode of Moiraine's point of view. I'm Lajar Dane of the White Ajah.
Hi, and I'm Giskel Cimaris, a scholar from Ilion. Now, I do want to give a quick spoiler warning. This is a reread podcast. So if you've not read all the books of the series, we urge you to do so before listening to this podcast because we will bring in any details from any book without warning. Now, today we're here to discuss chapters 7 and 52 from the Fires of Heaven and some other Moiraine highlights from that book.
I am going to get us started with some brief summaries of things that have happened before Moiraine's first point of view, which is in chapter 7. So we find that Moiraine doesn't appear as heavily in this book as she does in some of the others with long dialogue sessions. She's got a few notable ones, though. Most of what she does in this book is kind of look off into the distance and watch over these wagons and keep a close eye specifically on the wagon that has this twisted stone doorway ter'angreal in it. So we start seeing her in chapter 2 when they're in Roidion and she's ordering Kadir and the other peddlers who are actually dark friends to load up the ter'angreal to take them to Tarval. And she's only able to take a tiny fraction of them with the amount of wagons that they have. That's happening in the background of almost from everyone else's point of view. She also spends some time with the Wise Ones and Egwene. She is not a big fan of Rand's plans coming up, so he actually divulges his plans to her finally. He says that he plans to take the Aiel across the Dragon Wall and use them to kind of enforce peace everywhere else. He wants to stop all of these wars that are happening in his name. Moiraine decides that that sounds pretty naive and that taking the Aiel across the Dragon Wall would be a disaster. They did burn and loot a bunch of villages just 20 years ago during the Aiel War, and she's afraid of that happening again and all these nations turning against Rand and the Aiel. So this won't be very useful for him needing to unify everybody together for the last battle. She expresses this concern to the Wise Ones later in a sweat tent, and they don't agree with her. They don't really care what Aes Sedai plans are getting messed up by Rand having his own plans, and they also understand that the Karakarn and He Who Comes with the Dawn is going to break them. So they're not really concerned about everybody in the Westlands being against them. We also find a pivotal moment in chapter 6 in Moiraine and Rand's relationship. So this is when Rand gets attacked by Darkhounds, as he has many times before. He balefires them, which seems to be the only way you can take them out. Then he notices, or Moiraine brings his attention, that the 3 he just killed is probably not a whole pack. So he runs and finds the rest of them attacking Mat. He balefires those as well. And then once the threat is neutralized, Moiraine wants to have a word with him, really urgently needs to talk to him. And I pulled a couple of quotes from here, but the one that's most important is when she actually swears allegiance to him. She says, "Do you want an oath that I will not try manipulating you? I give it." Her voice hardened to crystal. "I swear to obey you like one of the maidens, like one of the guys shine if you require. But you must." Taking a deep breath, she began again more softly. "I ask you, humbly, to allow me to help you." She also apologizes to Rand in this chapter, which is not something I don't think we've ever seen her do. So this is very out of character, but she is so desperate that at this point she thinks it's the only way to reach him.
This is one of those things from the very first time I read the book, it really caught my attention. Because even though up until this point in my first read through, I had never read New Spring, I didn't know as much about Moiraine, you know this is out of character for her.
Mm-hmm.
This is a sign of two things. One, her desperation. She must help him. And really I know she's grown to like Rand, to care for him. She's been with him for quite some time now. But more than just him, she loves the world. She wants light to win. She wants to stop the dark one, and she knows she has to do that through him. So, yeah, she's pouring everything she's got. And the way she even said in her vow, "I ask humbly," when she restarted it the second time, that's the first time I recall seeing humility out of Moiraine. Even through this
Mm-hmm.
deep dive and going into her personality, that's just not Moiraine. But that shows how focused she is. She wants to save the world, and she's seen different possible futures when she went into the arches and Rudion when she went through the kind of what the wise women. She's seen this is what is necessary to win, and that's one thing about Moiraine. She's always been willing to buck authority, but here we see her bucking her own authority, not someone else's, because she's been willing to do that before, and she's done it many times, and been willing to pay whatever price is necessary because she will do what is right or what she believes is right. But here we see her going against her own authority, against everything that she's built up within herself all these years, all of her personality and everything, because it's what's necessary. So we still see that same core of strength that's leading her to do this.
You have a great point that she's been willing to violate all kinds of other things that she has adhered to buck any kind of authority, as you put it. So she's willing to break any rule and really do anything. But what she had not done so far was really compromise herself and her own kind of stubbornness. That was really the last thing she had left.
Her entire life's work comes down to this one moment, and it's something that is so anti-Moiraine.
Yeah.
So all of these things have fallen into place, and this is the step she's got to take. Until you sacrifice what you hold most dear, the sacrifice is not complete. She's
Yeah.
sacrificed, like you said, friendships. She's sacrificed relationships, everything else. But now she's got to sacrifice what's most dear, and that's her pride, because she's always believed she was right. That's the one thing she's never backed down from until this day, this moment.
Yeah. I really like how surprised Lan is by this as well. Rand seems to accept it. He's like, okay, yeah, I can deal with that. But Lan is like, what is wrong with you? Have you lost it? What's
Yes.
happening? And I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for chapter 7, because that's when more of that of Lan's judgment of this happens.
Chapter 7 is our first Moiraine point of view in this book, The Fires of Heaven. Chapter 7 is called A Departure. It opens with Egwene preparing to ride as all the Aiel are preparing to move out from Rudion. She's thinking back on the night she's had trying to visit everyone's dreams, especially Rand's, in which she's been unsuccessful. Some she has been successful in visiting of other people, and she wished she hadn't. And then it takes us into Moraine's point of view, where she's studying the wagons as they move out. They're loaded with the different terangrial and things that are being transported. She thinks about how it's just a small portion of what's there, and how she wished she had larger wagons or more of them, and the ability to transport more of them. She's especially thinking about those 3 rings that she walked through that are so much like the ones back in the White Tower, although they show something very different. Still, that step that the wise women take in order to become a wise woman, just as the one in the White Tower is used for when a woman becomes Aes Sedai, even though there's a lot of differences in how they function. Anyway, she's watching that. She's watching, thinking about the things that are being left behind, the things they're carrying, especially the twisted stone ring doorway, which is so much like the one in Tyr. And this one is now wrapped up in canvas to keep someone else from accidentally falling through it. And she thinks about the many futures she's seen as she stepped into those 3 rings, and she lived out thousands of different lifetimes in a sense. Being able to see possible futures and the outcomes of different ones, and thinking about how she can't remember all of them, but you kind of get a sense of different possible futures, especially as the times approach. And she gives this quote: "A spoonful of hope and a cup of despair." Means there is hope, but it is so small out of all the thousands or possibly millions of different futures. You got these very few that work. Lan, he standing by, and he begins to question Moraine's mood, that she's worrying, and that she has a mood of fear, which is very unlike her. He says, "I've seen you surrounded by Trollocs and Myrddraal, and you never batted an eye. I've seen you wait patiently for one scrap of news for days and never twitch a finger." But so he thinks about the way she's feeling now, and questions her about that, and begins to question her oath to Randall Thor. They discuss this for a moment, and then here's another quote that Lan brings forward. He says, "Perhaps it'll help your humility grow if he tells you to fetch his slippers and light his pipe." She, of course, thinks this is definitely not good humor. In fact, she even questions whether or not it was meant as humor. Then she begins to think about Lan himself and how his bond will be passed to someone else, and kind of hints to this being Nynaeve, though he doesn't say that explicitly. Then they leave. Moiraine thinking of how Lan himself is being changed and of how Rand has already changed the Aiel. And it closes out chapter 7, The Departure.
I really like that quote that you pulled, a spoonful of hope and a cup of despair. I had highlighted that as well because she has learned at least one way out of all the possibilities that she saw. She must have found at least one that will end up with Rand getting to the last battle. And I think that's
Right.
the thing she's hoping for the most. But she saw
Mm-hmm.
so many other possibilities in which that would fail in some way or other. I also really love I mean, it comes off like banter to the reader, but Moiraine is not amused. The little stuff she says back and forth with Lan,
With
because
Lan, yes.
he's funny, but she's kind of sassy back to him, and I found her responses funny as well about how, like, oh yeah, you would know about humility, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and he kind of equates humility to being a sword. You've never let my humility or get dull.
Yeah.
Basically, is the word he said. You keep it sharp. Yeah, I kind of like it. This is the Doctor Strange moment in Infinity War. Where he's looking through the 14 million possibilities, and there's only one in which they win. She doesn't, specifically say there's one pathway here. I don't think it's quite that narrow because there are probably hundreds of different choices that are so closely aligned, but they all pass through, they all bottleneck through this one choice she's got to
Mm,
make.
yeah.
Which, well, I say includes her making her oath to Rand, and then what is going to happen in chapter 52 that we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, everything kind of bottlenecks down, and the way this is almost like quantum mechanics. There's not just thousands but millions and millions of different choices. There are tiny differences, I think, within these, but there's still a narrow path. There's room to walk it, but there's not room to stray from one side to the other. And then again, what you said about the banter back and forth between her and Lan, it's almost like Lan is trying to lighten the mood a little bit. I'm
Mm,
sure he can sense her emotions
yeah.
and that she's brooding and worrying, as he said, and a little fearful, things that he's never seen before. And even questions are we that near the end? And of course, they are very close, but it's not like that day, it's not that imminent, but it is coming close. But at the same time, it's almost like he wants to lighten the mood a little bit, and she can't. The
Yeah.
the choices she's making, the path she's on is so narrow. The time is so short. The things she has to do are so serious. She doesn't even have time for levity with her oldest friend here.
Mm,
I would say probably closer friend than in many ways than Siouan. I guess it would be her oldest friend, so I should correct that statement. But the one she's absolutely spent more time with than anyone else the past 20 something years, probably her entire lifetime.
yeah.
She's spent more time with Lan than she has any other single individual. I've been closer to him because of the water bond in many ways, but yeah, she can't lighten up even for his sake. Yeah, they have a little bit of the repartee back and forth, but it's um, it's still rather grim on her part. But I guess so. If you're looking to take a step that would very possibly lead to your death, and the only thing that's going to prevent it is later, after you've made your sacrifice, other people have got to make the right choices at the right
Mm,
time. I mean, that's putting a lot of trust in other people, and that's certainly not Moraine's thing.
yeah.
She only trusts other people when they're doing what she's asked them to do, and even then, while she's watching them.
Yes.
And now she's having to put blind trust in other people,
One of
and
them being
it's
Matt
difficult.
Cawthon. I mean, come on.
Yes, yes, thank you for that.
That's got to be hard for anybody.
Gosh, I love Matt so much.
Yeah. She talks a lot about change in this chapter in her thoughts too. Her relationship with Lan has been changing over the last few books, and she reflects on that some. Um, and I also see some of it that she doesn't reflect on directly, but the fact that she is keeping more and more secrets from him. She started that in the Great Hunt about passing his bond, and now she has got to keep all of the stuff that she saw when she went through those rings in Rhuidean. She's got to keep that secret as well because if she tells anyone, it could change the outcome.
Right,
And
right.
she's thinking about how Lan is changing. Normally, he wouldn't have made all these jokes like this, and that's why she was sort of confused. Like, is he even trying humor right now? This doesn't seem like him. And she also thinks about how Rand is changing, opened up to her and told her some of his plans. He's also getting this sort of arrogant aura that most people seem to see from him as well. And the Aiel people are changing. And she wishes at the very end of the chapter that she could be around to see what he makes of them. She's seeing a lot of these seeds planted for change in all these people that she knows, but she knows she's not going to be around to see those bear fruit, perhaps. And the foreshadowing that she's not going to be around long really grows very heavily at this point, and I didn't notice my first time through how thick it's laid on, but it really is.
It's just kind of sad and heartbreaking because and I guess especially my first time through these books, I got a couple of books past this one before I stopped, and just waiting for each book to come out, and then read through the entire series once I had all 15 books, and I really dreaded this moment because I did not expect her to return. I didn't expect the
Yeah.
whole the Gandalf thing her to come
Right.
back. Although she does so very differently, it's an awesome moment when it happens. But yeah, I saw the foreshadowing of this, knowing she was going to quote unquote die, not knowing she was going to be able to come
Mm.
back.
Yeah, I really dreaded that moment, and everything you see, like you said, as foreshadowing up to it, was very heart wrenching for me.
You go through it again after that, knowing what's going to happen, and it eases your burden a little bit, but still knowing how she suffers and what all she goes through, it still makes it difficult. And the way she has to keep it to herself. And I think that's one reason that this chapter is named A Departure. It's not one single departure. It's not the departure. It's not everyone leaving Rudion. It's all the different changes. The Moiraine has departed from her natural way of doing things. We already discussed that. The beginnings of a departure between her and Lan. We see her kind of separating things from him. We see the Aiel are leaving the threefold land. We see so many departures, so many things changing. It's a very pivotal point in this book.
Yeah, it really is. I like your analysis of the title there. I have notes on a few more things that build up to chapter 52 that I'll give a summary of. And I'll just kind of blaze through these pretty quickly, but some other notable events are um, Moiraine changes her relationship with Egwene significantly in this book as well. So, because of the stuff that she knows and realizing she's going to have to pass the torch to all of these other heroes in the story, she is really changing the way that she speaks to them. So, she speaks to Egwene more like an equal, and she keeps advising her on how she needs to talk to Rand. And Egwene is taking lessons from this. I appreciate it. She thinks, come to think of it, Moiraine seldom raised her voice, and when she did, she was least effective in having what she wanted done. So she's thinking this after she comes out of Teleron Riyadh, and she has just learned there that there's Elaida has a warrant out for Moraine's arrest, and has also learned that Elaida has become Amyrlin and that Siwan was deposed. She doesn't know a lot of the details about it though. So she breaks this news to Moiraine, who doesn't seem to react much, and Egwene is bothered by this as usual, and Moiraine basically says, we knew what we were getting into. Take what you want and pay for it. Siwan and I took the path we wanted, and we knew we would have to pay for it eventually. She also talks to Egwene about why she has changed her relationship with Rand. People are starting to notice that she does everything that he says, and she responds to Egwene, because I remembered how to control Saidar. And that means, to embrace Saidar, you must surrender yourself to it, whereas Saidin is always seen as something you have to seize control of instead. That's part of the difference between these two energies. That's another beautiful lesson that she was able to impart Egwene with before she leaves for something like 8 books. She's spending her time trying to teach Rand politics, but he doesn't have a lot of time for it because he has all these lessons with Asmodean. So he's trying to get people out of the room and get some quiet time where he can get some channeling lessons. Eventually, the whole crew gets to Cairhien to fight the Shido. So they've already come over the Dragon Wall. They brought at least 6 clans of the Aiel, and I think some of the others are following. They get to Cairhien and they fight the Shido. Mat kills Couladin, so that's where we're at in the story. We don't see Moiraine a whole lot here, so her presence is sort of diminishing for a while throughout the story. She's giving people what lessons that she can, and she's kind of fading into the background because she realizes having more of a heavy hand in things is not going to work that well. She's got to kind of just trust that what she has taught all of these people is going to help them when she has to leave.
Yeah, because the last thing she needs to do at this point is to make them uber dependent upon her.
Yeah.
If they have to have her to make a decision, if they have to come to her for everything, kind of see this gradual pulling away. In order to teach someone something, sometimes you have to step back and let them do it.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that's what she's doing here.
She has not been doing that much in the series before. She's more of a control freak. It's hard to delegate and it's hard to trust people. That's, I think, a huge growth moment for her when she's able to do that finally in this book.
Yes.
After they conquer Kyrian and remove the Shido threat from there and everything, Rand has to go into the palace and deal with the nobles and take their oaths of fealty and everything. And that's exactly the place he would expect Moiraine to be. And especially in her home city, she would have a lot to say about how to play the game of houses. Instead, she's off staring at the wagons, not even listening to people around her. And so Rand just has to do this on his own. And so not only is she trusting everyone, she is really consumed with kind of brooding, which who wouldn't be under their circumstances?
Right. You can imagine you've kind of seen what's going to happen, but then it's one thing to see the Terangrial on the wagons, see all about there, but when you see them lined up on the docks, you're sitting there
Yeah.
looking at it, you think, yeah, that's a lot more familiar than it was when it was just traveling across the plains.
Right. She delivers some letters to Rand. One is from Elida, and another one that shortly followed it was from Alviarin. And Elida is basically telling Rand to come to the tower so he can be guided by the Aes Sedai. Alviarin instead sends a letter afterwards that she's like, hey, don't tell anybody, even Moiraine, and maybe don't trust that sneaky Kyrianan that I sent you this, but there's people in the tower who would, be interested in serving your glory and power. Old Moiraine might have instead told him what to do about these. She might not even show them to him. She shows these letters to him, and when he asks what it means, she asks him what he thinks about it. She doesn't actually offer anything anymore. She completely steps back and lets him make his own decisions, and she seems pleased with that. She tells him that he's going to do well, but she also tells him to be careful, because at this point he announces that his next plan is to go kill Ravine, because they hear that, it's a rumor, it's not true though, that Ravine had killed Morghese. So Rand's next plan tomorrow is to go to Caemlyn. That's what he's thinking. And she tells him to be careful. That's all the advice she gives about that. She talks to Egwene and Avienda as well. She kind of compliments them about how they handle Rand. It's unconventional, but it seems to be that, they're not going to kind of be submissive when he's angry. They're not going to be quelled by his stubbornness or his temper. They're going to be around to challenge him when he needs to be challenged or advise him when he needs it. They're really confused as to why she's telling them this. Like, Moiraine, you already do this. That would be redundant, right? But she just tells them to be careful tomorrow, and that tomorrow's going to be difficult for everyone.
I'm pretty sure that if I dropped my hardback copy of the book, it would fall open to chapter 52. It's just, it's one I've looked over and looked over and looked over. Everything leading up to it is important, but man, such a change in the story, because it's one of these things too, and I know we talk about his world building a lot, but build things up. Okay, it looks like our good guys are starting to win. They're quell the fighting in Kyrian. We've overcome the Shido. Couladin's gone. Finally, we're moving forward now. Boom! Here's the other shoe drops, as they say in Kyrian. So this is a point in the story where it not only hits us personally and hits the characters personally, but it really it takes things back a notch. You go from from thinking, okay, we're building up some steam now. We're moving ahead. The story is starting to advance, and suddenly everything just takes a sharp turn. And he's very good at that, because so many stories, once the good guys start winning, things just keep building up better and better, and their plans start falling into place. And he just keeps showing, whatever plans people form, that it's not going to happen that way. Just get that out of your head.
No plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Oh, absolutely. Never in the story. So anyway, yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts on the build up to chapter 52.
With other authors, at this point, the story would have started to wrap up. The last battle would have been in like the next book. Robert Jordan recognized that his characters needed to level up a lot more before they could really handle those challenges. So
Right.
he had to
Right.
give them some bigger challenges. And here he really throws a wrench into things. So I think that's a great segue into chapter 52 called Choices. So we start with Rand's first point of view section, in which Moiraine hands her letters to Rand. One of them is addressed to Rand himself and one to Tom. She also gives Mat some advice. Just relax, stop fighting the pattern. And she asks everyone to come down to the docks of the river Alguenia to see something, but she won't tell anybody what they need to see. Rand is annoyed by this because he was getting ready to go to Caemlyn and he doesn't want to be delayed. Then we switch to the point of view of Kadir, the man who's leading the caravan of wagons, and he's a dark friend. As we know, he has been leading this caravan that Lanfear was traveling in when they were in the Threefold Land, but now Lanfear had left. Kadir believes that she has died. Her alias, I think, was, they pronounce in the audiobooks as Kylie, but to me it looks sort of like Kayla. It's like Keille. Kadir thought that Kayla had died, and she actually pops back up in his wagon, which really confuses him. Then she shapeshifts and reveals that she was Lanfear the whole time, and she's asking for any new information about Rand and his plans, and she doesn't seem very happy with some of the stuff that Kadir is reporting to her. Then we switch back to Rand's point of view. Moiraine just is kind of looking around at the wagon. She's peering into these casks that he thinks are the ones holding the seals on the Dark One's prison, the ones that they currently hold, but she still hasn't told anybody what she came here to show them. And then suddenly Kadir's wagon explodes. Lanfear emerges holding Kadir's skin, and she's screaming that he had revealed to her that Lews Therin had slept with another woman. Moiraine runs toward Lanfear, and she throws up a shield of air to prevent Lan from following her. Lanfear attacks her with the power, knocks her down pretty easily, and Moiraine rolls under a wagon for the rest of the fight, pretty much. Lanfear is now just attacking everybody indiscriminately with the power, kind of giving as much regard to them as she would for insects. She's really not focused on anything except for Rand and the two women that she's trying to figure out which one did he sleep with. Aiel are running toward her, whereas most people are running away and all these ships are cutting their ropes to sail away. Instead, Aiel are running toward her to dance the spears and for most of them to wake from the dream. Rand channels and he encases him and Lanfear in some kind of dome that protects anyone else from getting involved in this fight. But unfortunately, he had included Egwene, Aviendha, and Moiraine inside this as well, which he didn't mean to do. Lanfear attacks Egwene and Aviendha, asking again which one is Aviendha, because that's she had heard from Kadir that he had been close with Aviendha. Rand does all that he can to distract her from the women. So he starts battling her with the power, and he struggles against her attempts to put shields around his connection to the source. Some of those shields are strong enough they probably could have actually gentled him, but he's able to cut through the weaves every time. Finally, he realizes, though, even though he has the power to do this with his Angreal, he could, strike her down with lightning or a number of other things. He realizes that he can't bring himself to kill a woman. And then we switch to Moiraine's point of view. Moiraine crawls out from under the wagon that she had fallen under at the beginning of the fight. She sees Lan lying on the ground, twitching. He might even be dying. She thinks about how she owes him her life many times over. But she's done what she can to keep him alive thus far, and she can't spare any time to do anything for him right now. She still has to do what she has to do. She was hearing a man laugh, and then she realizes that laughter has been coming from Rand. He's kneeling and crying and laughing at the same time. Is he mad? Either way, she still has to do what she has to do, so she takes her focus off of Rand and back to Lanfear. She sees Lanfear standing in front of the doorway, wearing an Angreal bracelet. Moiraine's really shocked to see her. She's not surprised that the Forsaken is there, but she's shocked to finally see in the flesh the woman who has been in her dreams so many times. She could probably finish off Rand with that Angreal she has on, so maybe she's just playing with him at this point. It makes Moiraine really angry to see that bracelet. Moiraine climbs up onto the wagon that Lanfear is standing on, her slight frame making no disturbance to the wagon's balance, nor attracting Lanfear's attention. Moiraine embraced Sidar, charged towards Lanfear, tore off the bracelet, and sent them both falling through the doorway. White light swallowed everything. And thus ends Chapter 52, Choices.
I mean, not only is it so integral to the story, but it's a very cinematic scene. This one, I think, will translate very well to the screen in the show. It even starts with Moraine's point of view that, she, under the wagon, she kind of wipes the blood off her mouth. He throws in little tidbits like that, again, add so much realism to it. And you just, it's going to be exactly like that in the show. There's no other way to do this scene. But so many little touches and nuances. When Kadir's wagon explodes, or the side explodes out of it, she walks out with something in her hand and throws it. And when the air catches it, they realize it's his skin. And that always makes me think, is the rest of Kadir still alive in that wagon? Knowing the Forsaken, probably so, because they are that cruel and horrible. Whether the rest of him's gone or in the quivering, that she really did not like to hear this. That Rand had slept with someone else. She's so jealous of Lu's Theron, and it's not love; it's just pure jealousy. She had even, I think, kind of convinced herself that it was love, but when she kind of gets to the point, she says, if if you can't love me, then I'll just kill you. I'm not paraphrasing.
If I can't have you, no one can, type of thing. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's just deep, horrible, bitter jealousy. There is no love in that. That's all about me, which of course describes Forsaken. Forsaken are all about themselves. It's never about anyone else. They have no shred of compassion. These that style themselves the chosen were chosen not really because of their strength or power, so much as their cunning and selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
Little tidbits like that of Moiraine getting angry when she sees the dark ivory bracelet, because it even mentioned that Moiraine had laid that at the foot of the Twisted Stone Terangre the day before, which means that detail had to be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's I guess one kind of a lure to make sure that that Lanfear gets a hold of that, because
that she would have been standing in the right spot.
Right, Rand is proving here that a lot of his adeptness with the power is because of his unconscious memories from Lu's Theron.
Mm-hmm.
The way he puts the dome up, so many of the things he does, the way he fights her, and it kind of comes to him to cut her weaves. He uses this weave here, basically cancel out her weaves as she's making them, and it saves his life. But that's things that just come to him, and very likely, even you go back early on in the Dragon Reborn and some of the other books, him kind of embracing the flame and the void, and suddenly he's a blade master. All of these things. I think it is kind of instinctive muscle memory and real memory and things that come to him from Lu's Theron. But he holds himself distinct and separate. And here in this battle, he could very easily have allowed himself to merge with Lu's Theron. He could have access to these memories. But the one thing that stood out to me, just because I had missed it so many times on other read-throughs, is why Rand had this aversion to killing women. I always thought it was the Two Rivers upbringing, and we've even talked about that. I've mentioned it in previous episodes. It's not him. That's Lu's Theron.
Yeah.
That's Lu's Theron in his grief, hugging Ilyena. He's holding her dead body, and when he has that moment of lucidity, right in the prologue, at the very very beginning of Eye of the World, that is his aversion to seeing women die. That comes from Lu's Theron more than it comes from Rand.
I think so too.
And it's so deeply embedded in there. It's like a block. He just can't get past. And the whole world would have gone into ruin at this moment if not for Moiraine, because Rand could not kill even one of the Forsaken in order to save his own life if that Forsaken was a woman. He just could not bring himself to do it. So, yeah, it shows that all the memories and all from Lu's Theron that he's getting are it's an awesome resource, but it comes with a liability as well.
This is the moment when he starts to get hung up on the idea of killing women. There is some of that True Rivers upbringing. He even talks about it in his thoughts, saying, he'd been brought up to understand that a man should sacrifice himself before letting any woman die. That's just the way that things are. We actually see Mat kill a woman earlier in this book too. So Matt was
Right.
sleeping with one of the Maidens of the Spear, who was from the Shido clan originally, and she was a dark friend. So she tried to kill him. Matt had to kill her. Matt didn't hesitate quite in the way that Rand does. He used his reflexes to just kind of defend himself. And he told Rand about it, and Rand was thinking, I don't think I could do that. You don't do that. We did see Rand kill a woman in The Dragon Reborn.
Yes, one of the merchants.
He cuts their heads off. He uses the power to set them in this circle around him so that they're kneeling.
Yes, yeah, bowing down to him, basically, yes.
Yeah, but he never thinks about that afterwards.
No,
and
no.
So, until now.
Right, we get that brief glimpse of that, him killing the merchant woman, of the words Matt saying, I killed her,
Mm-hmm.
and then Elena, and that
Yeah.
that's when this block really slams into place in his mind. And he says, even basically to paraphrase, even to save my life, save the world, I cannot do it.
I think that the reason why he didn't think about killing that merchant until this book, so he did this months ago and it didn't seem to bother him at the time, is because he didn't have you're exactly right. I think about the Lews Therin thing. He didn't have as many Lews Therin memories bleeding through. The first one we really see, other than maybe some of the sword play, which you can gloss that over saying, well, fantasy protagonists are always a little overpowered and they learn too quickly. So that just seems like a normal fantasy book that he's good with the sword. But when he uses a weave at the beginning of Shadow Rising to kill all the remaining Shadow Spawn at once, he couldn't explain to anybody what that weave was, and he continues to do things like that. He didn't have all this bleed through of Lews Therin before the Shadow Rising. So I think that's why he didn't ruminate on killing that woman in The Dragon Reborn, because yeah, that was unfortunate, but he didn't have all this baggage from Lews Therin and killing Ilyena to really make that a huge issue for him.
Right. That was more Rand, influenced by the taint. There's already, got a little bit of madness, and he was kind of letting that come in. But you're right. The more he begins to get in sync with Lews Therin, the more that block comes into place.
So I have just a few notes on chapter 53. So we got a little more about her, and we actually have some of her words. So chapter 53 is called Fading Words. It opens with Rand seeing what Moiraine has just done, tackling Lanfear and falling through this doorway. And the wagon is on fire. The Terran Grial is burning as well, and that doorway actually melts. Lan says that he can't feel the bond anymore, that she is gone, and so everybody interprets this to mean that she must be dead. At this point, Rand decides to read her letter. He now understands why he would have a letter from her when normally she could just talk to him. And so I thought I would read the content of the letter. These words will fade within moments after this leaves your hands, a warding attuned to you, so be careful of it. That you are reading this means that events have fallen out at the docks as I hoped. Since the first day I reached Roidion, I have known, it need not trouble you how, some secrets belong to others, and I will not betray them, that a day would come in Cairhien when news would arrive of Morghese. I did not know what that would be. If what we heard is true, the light have mercy on her soul. She was willful and stubborn, with the temper of a lioness at times, but for all that, a true, good, and gracious queen. But each time that news led to the docks on the following day. There were 3 branches from the docks, but if you are reading this, I'm gone, and so is Lanfear. The other 2 paths were much worse. Down one, Lanfear killed you. Down the other, she carried you away, and when next we saw you, you called yourself Lews Therin Telamon and were her devoted lover. I hope that Egwene and Aviendha have survived unharmed. You see, I do not know what happens in the world after, except perhaps for one small thing which does not concern you. I could not tell you, for the same reason I could not tell Lan. Even given the choices, I could not be sure which you would pick. Men of the 2 rivers, it seems, retain much of storied Manetheren in them, traits shared with men of the borderlands. It is said that a borderlander will take a dagger's wound to avoid harm to a woman and count it fair trade. I dared not risk that you would place my life above your own, certain that somehow you could sidestep fate. Not a risk, I fear, but a foolish certainty, as today has surely proved. A few final points. If Lan has not already gone, tell him that what I did to him, I did for the best. He will understand one day, and I hope, bless me for it. Trust no woman fully who is now Aes Sedai. I do not speak simply of the Black Ajah, though you must always be watchful for them. be as suspicious of Varen as you are of Alviarin. We have made the world dance as we sang for 3,000 years. That is a difficult habit to break, as I have learned while dancing to your song. You must dance free, and even the best intention of my sisters may well try to guide your steps, as I once did. Please deliver Tom Maryland's letter safely when you meet him again. There is a small matter that I once told him of, which I must make clear for his peace of mind. Lastly, be wary, too, of Master J.C. Natail. I cannot approve wholly, but I understand. Perhaps it was the only way. Yet be careful of him. He is the same man now that he always was. Remember that always. May the light illumine you and protect you. You will do well. And it's signed simply Moiraine, because she doesn't like to use her house name.
That can bring a tear to a glass eye.
Right?
That's hard to get through because it's such a poignant goodbye, a beautiful goodbye, really, without saying goodbye.
At this point in my first read through, I was skeptical of the fact that she had died because we didn't see a body, but I still was very hurt by this. And the letter was definitely a tearjerker. And so right after reading this book, I read New Spring for the first time because I wanted that retrospective on her life. And it made New Spring very sad to read. It was very good timing. She reveals so much here that she wouldn't have dared to earlier. I think it's particularly interesting that she knows that J.C. Natail is Asmodean. She hints at that, but even in this letter that's going to self-destruct, she can't say that outright.
Right. Just always that fear someone else will see it. Someone else will know somehow if you actually put the words down.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder, how does she know? It's as though she always knows the Forsaken when she comes across them.
Huh.
Well, perhaps that has a lot to do with the things she's seen in Ridian.
It could be, yeah.
The seeing visions of men Farshaw, some of the books she's read, I don't know.
Yeah, it could be that in some of her visions, let's say that Lanfear does either one of the two terrible paths where she kills Rand or sort of brings him over to the dark. In either of those paths, they might have just freed Asmodean, and so she would see that he was part of the world.
Ah, yes.
And then she would have recognized him from that. But it could just be that all of these dark friends in this wagon were suspicious enough, and so she may have just lined him up, knowing that the Forsaken are wandering around everywhere nowadays.
Right.
She may have just lined them up with descriptions of their personalities and what they kind of do.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this harpist just shows up out of nowhere in the desert with some clear dark friends, and
Yeah.
Rand keeps needing to have private chats with him. I don't know. This is sketchy.
Moiraine understood. I mean, how do you understand that? How do you stand back and say, all right, I know you're dancing with the devil over here, but I'm going to allow it because you need that.
Yeah.
Well, would you rather him not have learned from somebody else? Of course, there is no one else.
Right.
There are no other men who know how to channel except the Forsaken and Rand. So you go with what you got, I guess.
I think that it shows how much she trusts him at that point. By the time she realized who Asmodean was and that he was among them, she had to have believed that Rand was going to be okay and was not going to be turned to the dark side through Asmodean, because she cannot lie. And in Either World, she told all three of the boys that if the Dark One had, she would destroy them before the Dark One could get to them.
Right. Yeah.
Before they could actually be turned. So if she had suspected that Asmodean was really a danger to him, she would have done something about it. And so she says here, like, I don't condone it, but I guess I can't blame you. Yeah, so that shows me that she really trusts him a lot more than she used to.
Yes, she does. And for good reason. You have to put a lot of trust in somebody to sacrifice yourself to save them, in essence. That is atypical of our girl Moiraine. And that's one reason that makes this so difficult and so poignant is you see her journey, while it's not completely at an end, her journey in being able to work with and influence the Dragon Reborn, this mission she and Sion took up when they heard the foretelling from Guittara, that is coming to an end here at this point.
I found it interesting, too, that her letter also seems very accepting of his inability to kill a woman. So she says, I should have known this about Manetheren men, and it sounds a lot like how they are in the Borderlands. So I guess I'm pretty familiar with this because of being with Lan for so long. But if I were her, I feel like my letter might have said something like, "You woolhead, you're going to have to learn how to fight women at some point because this is not the last time. And there's no more me's to sacrifice for you. So
Right.
you got to get past this, dude. Go to therapy. I don't know. Figure it out."
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. Yeah. There should have been some white that would be good at counseling and therapy and things to
Maybe.
really. Oh, you could talk
Or a
about a lifetime
yellow
of
or a
arc for this.
gray
Yes.
or,
Yes.
yeah.
Somebody who could walk someone through that process. Oh my goodness, could have saved so much time. But all right, well, I hope all of you will join us next time for episode 17, where we cover chapters 16 and 49 of A Memory of Light.
You can find us on Podbean, Stitcher, Google Play Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can also stay updated on our Twitter at Lajara Sedai or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Lajara Dane, Dayne. And that's just to hear the episodes through a different medium if you like. Tell them bye, Gitskill.
Bye, Giskel.
One of them being Matt Cawthon. I mean, come on.
Yes, thank you for that.
That's got to be hard for anybody.
Gosh, I love Matt so much. His personality really comes out in the prior book and in this one, probably more than others. In fact, I saw a quote this week on social media. Someone had said has the most foreshadowing of anything about Matt Cawthon, and it's in the eye of the world early on. And when Matt has the badger in a sack there in Eamon's Field,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to do something with the Beltane party, and Rand says, Matt will never grow up. And that is absolutely the largest foreshadowing in this entire series. You love Matt, but yeah, come on, you're gonna have to trust him to do the right thing at the right time. But
yeah, this guy who picked up the dagger and Shatter Logoth. I mean, that's probably her biggest impression of him.
And then refused to tell her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, technically, he didn't see her until it was too late. But he can mess up a lot of things. But he does have a good heart. And
yeah. Oh yeah.
You really, his personality begins to shine through the more point of views you have of him in these books. You don't get to see his point of view as much early on.
I just don't think she knows what a good-hearted person he is, though. Maybe not yet.
No, I don't think she does. But she knows what she's got to do, and gosh, she does it. You've just got to admire her for that. So many things in this story could have saved so much time, could have prevented all of us from fighting through the upcoming slog, all of these things. But man, I just love this story. It's such a well written, well thought out, and it is imperfect, but it is one of the better fantasy stories penned to date.
I mean, it's certainly among my favorites, or else I wouldn't be here recording this. And I agree that there are always choices we could look at and say, oh, if this had never happened, we would have saved so much time. So much of this dilemma wouldn't have happened. This attack wouldn't have happened or whatever. But I do think that Jordan recognized that his characters really needed to train a lot more believably. They needed to go through a lot more before they were ready to do the things that they were. It's already implausible how young and inexperienced they are, that they end up in the leadership positions that they are, or being as powerful in the one power as they are. All of our main characters end up being able to do ridiculous and amazing things, but he gives them the time and the challenges so that it feels a lot more earned.
Oh yes, right. Yeah, they needed time to accept who they were and find out who they were, discover who they were.
And you have so much time for people to change quite a lot. I mean, most people start the book with extremely different opinions about who their favorite characters are compared to the end of the series. I think for most of us, we might have started, just thinking Nynaeve is a bully, and then she ends up being a favorite of mine at the end, for example. Or Matt's just really dopey, but then he doesn't change a lot. He just gets cool stuff to do, I guess.
Right. He learns to channel that ADHD mindset of his.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And go have it from being a disability to a really awesome ability. But find ways to channel it instead of changing him. In fact, if there are any changes within Matt, it's to make him more Matt-like, not less.
Right. I think so too.
really, I guess you could say that a little of that with Perrin as well,
Mm-hmm.
with Egwene, but not with Rand. Rand, I think, is the one who changes to be less of the same person toward the end of the story than the man or boy he started out as.
Yeah. I want to talk brief about how characters grow in some other series. I know you want to talk in an upcoming bonus episode about world building similarities and differences and things that we like, but I've just read some books recently that remind me of some of our characters in the
Yeah,
Wheel of
yeah,
Time.
let's do it.
We had already talked some about the fact that I read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. So,
Oh,
spoiler
yes,
warning for
yes.
Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I'll tag when we stop talking about it so y'all know what you can skip to. Simon's point of view in the beginning reminded me so much of Matt, but even more infuriating to read. I don't know if you remember much of the details of what it was like to be in Simon's head, but he was just always staring off into the distance, daydreaming, and then he would
Mooncalf.
screw something
Yeah.
up. Yeah,
Yes.
Simon Mooncalf was always just really spacey, and he would always just kind of screw up everything. And he didn't care about anything that was really important to the people around him. Like Morganies would try to teach him all these things he might need to know in the future, and he just wanted to hear about battles. He just wanted to be a soldier and fight, and it was really annoying.
He was the quintessential whiny brat at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
I mean, he really was. I mean, especially for someone who was not raised in a privileged life. I mean, he was, basically a foundling. He was raised by everyone in the castle instead of just, one person. He did not have a privileged upbringing in any way, yet he still found some way to be just a whiny, useless kid. It took him a while to grow out of that.
But when you talk about Matt seeming like he has ADHD, I definitely felt that way about Simon as well. Like, this kid would have been put on Ritalin if that was a thing in this universe. I'm
Yes,
very sure of that.
absolutely, absolutely.
We saw that when he went through a lot more, he still had those tendencies of being kind of dreamy for a while, but eventually he was able to kind of take up leadership and do things that were very important and be responsible and take care of other people. And I just was hoping that that's what would happen. When I was in the first 10 or 15 chapters of the first book, I'm like, is Simon gonna change a lot? Because I don't know if I can stick this out if he's not. Where's this gonna go? It was cool to watch him really grow up, and I think that it was amazing the growth that he could go through in only 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
Yes.
Jordan definitely stretches his out quite a bit more, but it works better, in a trilogy when you've only got one main character. He had a few other points of view in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, but those people didn't change quite as much. You had Miriam L was the other important one, I think, but the others were kind of like, we just need eyes to be in this group of people right now, or we need somebody in, when you had Esgrimnor points of view and other people like that, it's just kind of like we needed somebody who was with this group of people.
Right.
So that's how you can grow a character so fast in only 3 books. But when you have such a massive ensemble cast in the Wheel of Time, that's why you need 14 books to do it.
You're right. That's one of the good and bad things about the Wheel of Time series. It's good because so many books leave me wanting more.
Yeah.
To me, still one of the ultimate fantasy books out there, high fantasy, is The Lord of the Rings. That's the one that got me started on fantasy. And reading that, it changed my entire outlook and view on reading. And even though I loved to read up to that point, and as far as what I read, the source material, because it was so epic. And to be honest with you, the majority of the fantasy I read for the next 15 to 20 years after that was looking for the next Lord of the Rings, somebody else that could take me there. It took Jordan a lot more books to do it, but he's one of the few that can take you to that world and make it such an epic story that it spans centuries, and you feel like you're a part of it the entire time. There are not many authors that could do that. Not many that could take an idea, just the story of these characters and put it on such a grand scale that you really feel like they changed the world. Robert Jordan is one of them who did that with The Wheel of Time. I've never found another Tolkien. Well, because there's not another Tolkien.
Right.
Jordan is not another Tolkien, but he's Robert Jordan, and that's what he needed to be. And he's had a story that's touched so many lives and so many people in different ways. And so I'm proud to, one of the things I love about it, like I said, so huge, so epic, but that is all to a detriment when it comes to putting it on screen.
Mm.
You can't have 4,000 characters or however many,
Right?
you simply cannot have every detail of the story. So many things happen internally to the, thought processes of the people. You've got to translate that differently to the screen. So it's a big challenge, and
Hmm.
especially when they're only going to have, I think, 8 episodes in the first season, which is, that's going to be an incredible challenge. Again, I'm putting a lot of trust in them. I think they're up to the challenge. I think they're going to make it work. I hope it can be as epic on screen as it is in print.
Mm.
But right now, it is one of the greater fantasy epics ever written.
Another story that some of these characters seem similar to me is well, I just started the third book in Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy. And so, spoilers for that series. I remember you saying that you didn't remember as much from it, but the character growth in that one is also kind of like Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. It's very massive over only 3 books, and I've only just
Right.
started the third one. The stuff that these people that Fitz Chivalry goes through reminds me a lot of. I see some Perrin parallels, but also Rand. How Rand is just completely broken down by some of the stuff he has to do or be for
Mm,
other people.
yes, yes.
And how nothing about what he has to do, none of this power is fun at all. It's just more and more heartbreak for him. And that's what I'm
Right.
finding with Fitz so far. I can't even imagine a happy ending to this story because he already hates having to be a human after he's done all this bonding with his wolf over the past book. And he had to physically, like, kill his body and then put his soul into the wolf for a while and then be put back into his own body. And it was just heartbreaking when that third book starts and it's from his perspective, but he's like completely a wolf. He doesn't care about any human stuff. Like when
Yes,
people are
yes.
talking about anything other than procuring food or something, he wants to go sleep by the fire. And they're
Mm,
trying to get him to, drink out of a cup instead of just lapping it out of a bowl. And just it was just heartbreaking that the Fitz that we knew was gone. And then when he does kind of come back into himself and regain his memories as a human, he still thinks like what a cruel thing it was that they did to bring him back. It's so heavy.
yeah, it is. And I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but
Oh yeah.
but I will say Robin Hobb's stories don't always tend to have a happy ending.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and I didn't know that. The first one I read in that was actually the following trilogy to that, the Tawny Man trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that one, but it had a lot of spoilers for this first one, so I'm not going to go into it.
Oh.
But it was just, I read some of that first, then I went back and read the Farseer trilogy, and man, I found it so good. But I was coming at it from a different perspective because I knew some of the things that would happen later.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it spoiled a little bit for me, but yeah, it's still, yeah, a lot of growth, a lot of change. Of course, it really takes him from being a small child to
Yeah.
being a man when you see the things that the chivalry goes through, and all the changes and his unique abilities that he has. I like Robin Hobb's world building abilities because she takes a very different approach to it rather than trying to make it seem so familiar to our world. She throws in some things that are very, very different. The ways magic is used and all of that is very interesting, very unique. Um, but she has several, 3 or 4 or 5 trilogies. Well, one of them I think is a quadrilogy, has 4 books in it, but all in the same world, in the same setting. Some of them happen at the same time. Some happen, a few years before or after, and then maybe set in a different part of the continent or something like that. But there is overlap in such a way that you can read just one trilogy and it stands alone completely, or you read all of them and you see, to use Jordan's phrase, you see the the lace of ages. You see how these things are woven together in ways that just it blows your mind. She had to have spent so much time tying these stories in the way she did. It was really mind blowing to make such beautiful stories that are each standalone stories. They have very different perspectives and all, but I love them. I love her series.
What I like the most about Fitz Chivalry's story so far is it's so believable the way that he alienates people and destroys relationships. It's so difficult to read, but it reminds me a lot of how Rand has to be cold and cut people off. Now, Fitz is not doing all of that on purpose. He's just making a lot of mistakes and alienating people.
Right.
The hurtful things that he says to people where he thinks there's no repairing the relationship after this is just, it's very believable. And how he kind of treats his girlfriend as sort of just something on the side when his main duty is to his king, and she recognizes that she's not a priority in his life and that she has to let him go because of that. I think it's very realistic. A lot of people can lose themselves in a lifestyle or a career of some kind and really hurt the people around them because of it.
Yeah.
Another thing I find really interesting is how the connection with animals is fleshed out really well, and it's sort of the tension that I imagine Perrin to be feeling. Some of that is fleshed out pretty well in the Wheel of Time, but I think we see so much more in Farseer, the risks of letting the animal nature take over, what that really looks like. You know, we see Gnome, we have a glimpse of the guy who went full wolf, but we don't see a lot of Perrin really doing any of that stuff or what he needs to do to prevent becoming that.
Exactly. Yeah, you see his fear of it, but you never see anything other than you had that one glimpse of someone who was irreparably had gone too far, but you never really see Perrin approach that limit to
Mm-hmm.
me. We see Rand approach his limit of being too close to lose Theron.
Yes. That's
But
similar.
we never see, in my memory of it anyway, we never see Perrin get too close to that line. He always stays far back from it, and he's trying to find the line. I guess that's his problem. He doesn't know where that line is between man and wolf, and he doesn't want to get close enough to cross it. So he dances as far back away from it as he can.
Yeah, that's true.
That just because he does, he has no one to guide him, to tell him. I mean, they need a Wolf Brother Society or something.
Yeah, they need a
they can
support
meet
group.
every third Monday, yes, and just discuss these things. And here's what I learned. Man, get together with some. Go hunt down Elias, and y'all spend some time talking about this.
Yeah. We get the pack structure feeling a lot more from the Farseer trilogy too, like what that means to be in a pack. And I don't think we feel that as much with Perrin. You know, I guess he becomes a leader of people, and so, but it's interesting that the wolves just kind of accept him as a pack leader unconditionally. There's no, like, when he asks the wolves to do something, they do it. There's never really any going through the wolf power structure very much, but I think we get to see what pack is and what it means more in Farseer.
Yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about that. Perrin is always considered to be a leader of the pack, but he never considers himself to be part of the pack.
Yeah.
He likes them. He uses them, but he never allows himself to be one of the pack, really.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because he's so afraid of crossing that line. I've never been able to come back.
It could be, yeah, because Fitz went too far. I mean, that's why we see him. He realizes, oh, that's why Burrage used to be so fastidious about hygiene, because you have to be. Like, if you don't stay on top of it once you've bonded with a wolf, like, you're just going to be a beast and not care about any of this stuff. He has to make himself care, and that really felt like a depressive episode. Like, it was so immersive in what it feels like to just like not care that you don't brush your teeth, you know what I mean? And that seeming like an overwhelming thing to do, and you don't care about why you'd want to do that. So I found it interesting. It was just so relatable in a way, how he had to get up and make himself do some things, even though he didn't feel any like relevance of why he actually should.
I can feel his pain on this day. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are times you're struggling through a health issue or something, and the last thing you want to do is get up and take a shower and brush your teeth. And we start saying, I just feel so human when I got cleaned up. Well,
yeah,
literally, we're acting more like a human, less like an animal. Yes, I need to do that a little more.